Thanks for tuning in. And we begin this hour with breaking news out of Ottawa. CTV Question Period host Evan Solomon joins me now. Evan, what can you tell us?
Well, CTV News has exclusively learned that Andrew Leslie, the one-time star candidate and the former lieutenant general in the military, is set to testify in the controversial Mark Norman trial against the government on behalf of Mark Norman, if indeed he is called as a witness to the trial. CTV has also learned that Leslie informed the Prime Minister's office, or at least the Whip's office, a year ago that he would testify on behalf of Mark Norman. That would be against the government in that trial a year ago, and that he requested that his legal fees be paid, sources confirming that indeed the government is paying his legal fees to testify against them in this case. Remember, Mark Norman was at one point the second in command of Canada's military, but in 2018, he was removed from his position after he was charged with breach of trust in allegations that he leaked confidential information about a shipping contract in Quebec. Norman denies he did anything wrong, and his legal team is now skirmishing with the government as there is no trial date yet set. But again, this is interesting news because Andrew Leslie is only a rookie MP. He's only a one-termer. He was a star candidate. He was the lieutenant general in the military. And when he was at one time the Liberal Party whip, then he worked very closely with Chrystia Freeland negotiating for NAFTA, but he never became a cabinet minister. And he's decided just 2 days ago, he announced he will not be running again on behalf of the Liberals. Sources tell me his decision not to run has nothing to do with his decision to testify on behalf of Mark Norman. But I should tell you that Norman is a constituent in his riding. He and Mark Norman, of course, both members of the military. They've known each other for 15 years as acquaintances. But back in 2010, Andrew Leslie was tasked with a very big job running a study of how to transform Canada's military, and Mark Norman worked on that. So they know each other well.
Right.
We don't know if he's going to testify as a character witness or substantially, but this is a huge moment that Andrew Leslie, a star, high-profile Liberal, testifying against the government if called.
And as you mentioned, the timing rather coincidental that he is announcing that he will not be running again. But explain for us, if you will, Evan, the implications this might have for the Liberal government with the trial coming up before an election.
Well, the legal implications are very difficult to understand because the trial date has not set. It's a very high-profile case about Mark Norman. After all, Mark Norman himself was a huge figure in the military, the second most powerful person. So that the legal implications on that, we don't know. Andrew Leslie will not comment at all about any of this because he is, according to sources, on the defense list. If called, he would testify. But the political implications are huge. The optics of this are terrible because here you have a guy who's just decided not to run. Now we've learned that he will stand up for Mark Norman against the government. The optics of that don't look good. And look at where this is coming from. After the Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott situation, where those two high-profile former cabinet ministers turned on the government, the optics here, despite the fact that sources said one have nothing to do with the others, the optics here will look like, one, Leslie doesn't want to run because he doesn't have confidence. Why? He says he wants to move on to other things, but it's very rare to see a one-time star candidate not run again. But the second issue is now that we know he's going to testify on behalf of Mark Norman, you really got to question whether the government has the confidence of their own caucus on these huge cases. And so there'll be new questions raised about this as this story starts to fall out.
And they're also picking up his legal fees.
Well, that's right. And let me just say this. The government is picking up Andy Leslie's legal fees, which is not atypical. He is, after all, an MP. But they are not picking up Mark Norman's legal fees. Mark Norman, sources tell me, has spent more than $500,000 in his defense. He is in financial crisis over this, according to sources. So he's almost financially ruined by this, whereas Andrew Leslie is going to get his legal fees paid for. By the way, as is the Crown obviously is paid for. So it's fascinating to see that Leslie will testify. He will have his legal fees covered. One thing I should also say, I did ask, and there's very little comment on this, if Andrew Leslie was pressured not to testify. I also asked if Andrew Leslie ever was pressured, if he does testify, not to run again. Sources tell me that neither of the case, that he was never pressured not to testify and never pressured about running and linking this to Norman. Again, Andy Leslie not commenting on any of this. Nonetheless, you know, anytime you have any whiff now after SNC of judicial interference, you got to be very careful. Yeah. But sources say that was not the case here.
Evan Sullivan with the exclusive breaking news out of Ottawa. Evan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Meantime, we want to give our viewers a little bit of background on this case because the story first came to our attention back on January 9th of 2017 when police raided Vice-Admiral Mark Norman's home, seizing computer equipment, cell phones, iPads. Then on January 13th, Chief of Defense Staff Jonathan Vance suspended the Vice-Admiral from his command, writing that he had lost confidence in Norman. In April of 2017, the judge in the case lifted a publication ban, and then we learned in the documents that the RCMP accused Vice-Admiral Norman of leaking government secrets relating to government shipbuilding contracts. And in November of that same year, the government then rejected a request from Norman to cover his legal fees in the case. In March of 2018, RCMP formally charged Norman with breach of trust, and that charge could lead to a 5-year prison term if the Vice-Admiral is convicted. In April of 2018, Vice-Admiral Norman makes his first court appearance in the case, and then this summer, August 19th, is when the trial is scheduled to begin just 2 months before a federal election.